be celebrating an event in the life of our 16th President, Abraham Lincoln. Today we commemorate the 156th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address, which took place on this date in 1863. We also want to pay tribute to all veterans, past, present, and future, as we have just passed Veterans Day and approach Remembrance Day next week. I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and I'd just like to introduce Mr. Jerry Skoletsky, our Senior Vice Commander. Please join me now in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to ask Sister Dorothy Kelly, please come forward for our opening prayer.
A prayer from Lincoln, so I just wanted to say it, and it's called Be Thankful. Let's bring this home. What do you cherish today? Who sacrificed for a cause to ensure the results that you enjoy on the other side of the payment of the cost? Pause and be thankful. Express your appreciation to those who have given so that you can be free. Thank your parents, guardians, grandparents, military personnel, teachers, and other family members and friends for all they have given up for you to help you achieve as you enjoy the blessings of liberty. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sister Kelly. I'd now like to ask Julie Esty, the past president of Auxiliary 10, a poem.
I'm reciting The Vacant Chair by H.S. Washburn. We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We shall linger to caress him while we breathe our evening prayer. When 1 year ago we gathered, joy was in his mild blue eye. Now the golden cord is severed, and our hopes in ruin lie. At our fireside sad and lonely, often will the bosom swell, at remembrance of the story, how our noble Willie fell. How we strove to bear the banner through the thickest of the fight, and uphold our country's honor in the strength of manhood's might. True they tell us wreaths of glory evermore will deck his brow, but this soothes the anguish only, sweeping o'er our heartstrings now. Sleep today, O early fallen, in thy green and narrow bed. Dirges from the pine and cypress mingle with the tears we shed.
Thank you very much. Sister Susan Mertz, the past president of the Ladies Auxiliary Department of Pennsylvania, is our guest speaker this morning.
At the end of the Battle of Gettysburg in July of 1863, the town of 2,400 people were left to care for 51,000 casualties, including 7,058 dead. They cared for the wounded, their children cared for the wounded. The streets were red with blood, the streams were red with blood. The stench was so bad they got ill as soon as they left their houses. Trees were splintered, houses damaged with shot and shell. 3,000 dead horses had to be pulled to the west end of town and burned. Dead livestock all over. Amputated limbs piled to roof lines where there were field hospitals. That was Gettysburg in July. The dead were hastily buried for sanitary reasons. The town and Mr. Everett decided that there should be a national cemetery, and they made it next to Evergreen Cemetery. So they invited Mr. Everett to speak, and President Lincoln was invited as kind of an afterthought. He wrote his address before leaving Washington. He was ill at the time. He had a mild case of smallpox, His son Tad was critically ill and they weren't sure that he would survive the night. He had a fever and he'd already lost 2 sons to such fevers. But he felt compelled to go to Gettysburg. His address was very heartfelt and very brief, only 72 words. And many of the people in the crowd didn't even realize that he had given the address and it was already over. So, as you know, we marched there on Remembrance Day to commemorate his dedication of the National Cemetery and marching up the street with Union troops. So it's been one of the most recognized speeches not only in our country, but it's recited and learned all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Susan. And now speaking of the Gettysburg Address, Jerry.
I didn't know President Lincoln had a cold, which is kind of funny because I have a cold.
Yeah,
So-
smallpox.
I don't have smallpox.
I'm glad.
Me too.
Thank God.
87 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggle here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us to live in, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. And we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from evil.
Thank you. Those words are true today as they were back then. I would now like to ask Sister Joyce Kecklock to join me in presentation of the reading. Patriotic instructor Jerry O'Malley to present a poem, Bivouac of the Dead.
I'm going to read a stanza from the poem by Theodore O'Hara. The muffled drum's sad toll that has beat the soldier's last tattoo.
certificate presented to you retroactively to 27th of January 2007.
Awesome.
Better late than never.
Thank you, Commander. Appreciate it.
I'm sorry.
You're going to have to stand. Is that Commander? You are now at the altar of the Order of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War. For obligation, and I assure that you are taking this obligation, it will not conflict with any duties you may owe your God, your country, or yourself. If you are willing to proceed, please place your left hand on the Bible. You will now grasp the standard of the flag with your right hand and say, pronounce your name,
Timothy Chase.
and repeat after me. I, your name,
Timothy Chase,
in the presence of the great Creator,
in the presence of the great Creator,
and witnessing member of this camp,
and witnessing member of this camp,
hereby,
voluntarily,
and solemnly
and solemnly
pledge myself
pledge myself
to support and defend
to support and defend
the government of the United States of America,
the government of the United States of America,
to always obey the day
to always obey the day
set aside
set aside
by the Grand Army of the Republic
by the Grand Army of the Republic
as Memorial Day,
as Memorial Day,
sacred to the memory
sacred to the memory
of the Union soldiers and sailors
of the Union soldiers and sailors
of 1861 to 1865,
of 1861 to 1865,
and do all in my power
and do all in my power
to persuade others
to persuade others
to do the same,
to do the same,
to be faithful
to be faithful
in all duties of citizenship,
in all duties of citizenship,
be obedient
be obedient
to the law of the land,
to the law of the land,
to obey the Constitution
to obey the Constitution
and the regulations of this order,
and the regulations of this order,
and to promote activity,
and to promote activity,
its objectives and interests,
its objectives and interests,
always and everywhere.
always and everywhere.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. I now show you the badge of our order. The inscription, Sons of the Union Veterans of the Civil War, reminds us of our high estate and our duty to our country. We are the sons of Union veterans. May we prove ourselves worthy of this title. The ribbon is a union of red, white, and blue, the colors of our country's flag. The red signifies the unstinted stem of blood, shed that the blessings of a free government might be our heritage, and that our own blood is pledged to preserve the freedoms and responsibilities we so gladly receive. The blue tells us of true faith and allegiance which our forefathers held to their country and to each other, and charges us to be mindful of their example. The white represents peace, which with honor may our country always enjoy. The motto, preserved by the grace of God, reminds us that without the ever overruling hand of the all-wise providence, the sacrifices of our forefathers could not have been afforded, and that God's favor alone secures the preservation of our liberties. Like the eagle, may we be quick to discover our country's needs, strong in its defense, and swift to carry out the objects of our order. Have your pen? May you wear your badge long and proudly, and may it always be a guiding star to you in the discharge of your duties in a private life, as well as a son of the Union Veterans of the Civil War. Without drawing blood. I will attempt to put this on with no damage to your skin. Whenever the United States flag is passing or being passed in a formal manner, as on parade, members of the Sons of the Union Veterans of the Civil War, not in military uniform, will salute the flag by removing their hat or cap, the headdress being on the right-hand side of the left shoulder, right forearm against the breast. When not wearing a head cover, the right hand will be placed over the heart. This will not apply when the flag is flying from a staff, but only when supported by a color bearer. When giving the Pledge of Allegiance, stand with the right hand over the heart. On all occasions when the national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, is played or sung, members of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War should stand at attention with hat or cap removed. When seeking admission into a camp, the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, in case the camp is in session, you will present your membership card to the color guard at the door when he responds to your knock of 3 raps at the door. On being admitted, approach the altar and salute the commander. And on return of the salute, take your seat. On rising to speak, and you will salute and say, "Commander," and in crossing the floor, always pass to the rear of the altar. 1 rap calls the camp to order and seats the same when standing. 2 raps calls the officers and staff to their feet. 3 raps calls upon the entire camp. If deep in your heart there lives a love of freedom and practice devotion to the principles and institutions for which your forefathers fought, then no personal danger, no selfish consideration can quench that love that makes you ungrateful or disloyal to the flag of the United States. Let us then entwine each thread of this glorious fabric around our hearts and catch the spirit that breathes upon us from the battles and victories of America's sons. Let us resolve now and forever that we will stand and fight for that flag and the principles and institutions it symbolizes. It was waved over our cradles. Let us make high resolve that unchanged and unstained as it came from the hands of our fathers, shall we wave it over our graves. Officers and brothers, I take great pleasure introducing your new brother, bound to us by sacred ties of fraternity, charity, and loyalty. Let us give him a brotherly welcome.
Have all the reports been properly completed and forwarded to department headquarters?
They have.
Treasurer's not here, so I'll assume that all monies have been sent to department headquarters also. Commander Jones, in relieving you of the command of this camp, on behalf of department officers, I convey to you their thanks for the manner in which you have discharged your duties. I trust that in surrendering the command of the camp, your interests in the welfare of this order will not cease. Having received the highest honors which your associates can confer upon you, your continuing commitment will point the way for others who serve the order. Please stay seated. Installing officer. Will the guide place at my right chairs for the officers to be installed? We can skip that. Commander-elect, are you prepared to announce your staff appointments? If so, the guide will hand your list to the secretary. Have we discussed that with the secretary?
Not yet.
Do we know who they are?
Your appointed positions.
Oh, that's the patriotic instructor, the guide, and the
Yeah.
no, we do not have those. We're basing it on whoever shows up that day is basically what's been kind of done. So,
All right.
We will work on that.
Can we keep them then, the previous
For the
officers?
time being, yes.
Okay, Secretary, can you call the roll of the officers-elect and staff appointees who, as their names are called, will rise?
Okay, Commander Jerry Skotlewski. Senior Vice Commander Jim Jones. Junior Vice Commander Mike Passero. Secretary Bob Schaefer. We do not have a chaplain. Patriotic Instructor, Gerard F. O'Malley. GAR Historian is Joe Long. Guide, Timothy Chase. Color Bearer, Giovanni Lisi, who's not here. And Camp Council would be Harold Myers, Craig Kelly, and Dale Kecklock.
Attention. Brothers of Ezra Griffin, Camp Number 8, Department of Pennsylvania, Sons of the Union Veterans of the Civil War. These are the officers who have been chosen to serve you for the next term. If any brother present has any valid objection to offer why any of them should not be installed, let him now speak, or forever after hold his peace. As no work of this nature can be successful without the assistance of the divine provider, the chaplain will ask his assistance and guidance. Do we have a chaplain?
Yes, sir. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, we humbly ask your blessings on these brothers assembled for installation. Grant them your wisdom that they may daily perform the duties of the office into which they are being installed, with the knowledge that thou art ever watchful over them. Keep them in good health, and that they will not falter on the way. Bless them with your great mercies, and that you might be competent to administer the many problems that they will confront. Bless their every action in your name, through the mediation of your blessed Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Amen.
Commander, it has pleased your associates to elect you to the position of commander, but before your installation, it will be necessary to give your answer to the following charges, which partly define your duties. Listen attentively and respond when all are complete. Do you agree to be impartial and upright, to obey all orders or rules and regulations originating from proper authority? Do you promise to avoid disputes and quarrels, to submit to the will of the majority, to be courteous to all brothers and visitors, faithful to your camp and brothers, and to act with honor to all with whom you come in contact? Do you promise to attend regularly all meetings of your camp, to instruct and advise your associates, to perform faithfully your duties as commander, and to see that your secretaries' and treasurers' reports are sent in promptly to department headquarters? Do you promise to expose and discountenance impostors and all who may try to disturb the harmony of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War? Do you agree to spread the principles and objects of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, to pay true allegiance to the order, and to do all in your power to extend its influence in the proper observance of Memorial Day? These are charges and regulations of the order. Are you willing to subscribe to, and do you promise to support them?
I do.
Please be seated. Guy, please bring the officers elect to the position of the altar. Officers, stand with your left hand on the Bible and your right hand raised. Listen, brothers, and witness this declaration of your officers. Each of you say, I, and pronounce your name and repeat after me. I, having been chosen an officer of this camp, hereby renew the obligation given at the time of my initiation and in the presence of Almighty God,
and in the presence of Almighty God,
and this company here assembled,
and this company here assembled,
do solemnly and sincerely
do solemnly and sincerely
promise and declare
promise and declare
that I will,
that I will,
to the very best of my ability,
to the very best of my ability,
in word and deed,
in word and deed,
and without fear or favor,
and without fear or favor,
faithfully,
faithfully,
honestly,
honestly,
and with strict impartiality,
and with strict impartiality,
carry out,
as
an officer of the camp,
an officer of the camp,
the principles and objects
the principles and objects
of the order
of the order
that I will closely adhere to,
that I will closely adhere to,
execute and sustain
execute and sustain
its constitution and regulations,
its constitution and regulations,
bylaws and all orders
bylaws and all orders
coming from competent authority.
coming from competent authority.
I furthermore promise and declare
I furthermore promise and declare
that in no manner or form
that in no manner or form
will I in any degree abuse or misuse
that I in any degree abuse or misuse
the authority placed in me,
the authority placed in me,
and that upon my retirement
and that upon my retirement
from the office
from the office
I am now about to assume,
I am now about to assume,
I will without delay
I will without delay
turn over to my successor
turn over to my successor
all of the property of the camp
all of the property of the camp
in my possession,
in my possession,
taking his receipt therefore
taking his receipt therefore
to the full and complete performance
to the full and complete performance
of all the foregoing
of all the foregoing
on my honor as a man.
on my honor as a man.
I hereby pledge myself,
I hereby pledge myself,
and I pray God
and I pray God
to keep me true and steadfast
to keep me true and steadfast
in this my sacred obligation
in this my sacred obligation
as an officer of this camp.
as an officer of this camp.
Attention. All officers except the commander will be seated at your respective stations. Guide, conduct the commander to his station. Commander, your officers are at their respective stations, and nothing now remains to be done except placing you in full control. You will be personally responsible for the charter of the camp. Prize it for the privilege it confers. Keep it in view at every meeting. I now entrust you to care the rituals, for the safekeeping of which you will be held responsible. You shall also have a copy of the Constitution and regulations for the government of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, which I advise you to study with care as to enable you to render just decisions. Last, you will receive the gavel, the emblem of authority. One rap calls the camp to order and seats the same when standing. 2 raps calls the officers to their feet, and 3 raps calls up the entire camp. Now, by the power and authority vested in me as installing officer of the Department of Pennsylvania, Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, I hereby declare the officers of Ezra Griffin, Camp Number 8, Department of Pennsylvania, legally installed and qualified to enter upon the discharge of their service duties for the term ending December 2020 or until their successors are duly elected and installed. Now, I am pleased to present you with the badge of the Officer of Camp Commander. Commander, assume your command, be true to your vow, faithful to your trust, unflinching in your loyalty, and rule with civility, impartiality, and firmness. And may your camp prosper, and may its name be always honored. Now, Jim, you have to surrender your badge.
He gets his own, but
And you get your new one. That's, I guess that's his badge, his pin there. Congratulations.
The month of November, 1864. The Battle of Gettysburg was won. The Battle of Vicksburg was won. And Atlanta was captured. But despite all these great victories that we had, Grant was never able to close the war, to end it. In fact, the Confederacy fought fiercely after that and won some very significant battles. And so I think that we forget about this sometimes. He's still alive. The Confederacy is still alive. And here we are in 1864, November of 1864, and the war is going to continue. So where are we today? Okay, here's what's been happening. The election, rather than the war, commanded most of the attention in the North. The election of Lincoln, the re-election of Lincoln. For the first time in history, the armies of a major nation, now remember this, the armies of a major nation would vote during the war. The first time this has ever happened. Rampant electioneering involved not only politicians, but army officers as well. President Lincoln was still anxious about the outcome. And the reason he was because the election that had just been held. The October state elections had given him more confidence because he could see that there was a positive reaction coming about. General McClellan remained popular among those discontented with the progress of the war. So he was a very strong contender at this particular point. But the victories at Atlanta and in the Shenandoah on the coast and in Missouri had undoubtedly quieted the opposition. Southerners, of course, also followed the election campaign with interest. Some favored McClellan as he might bring peace to the country. Others favored Lincoln because at least they knew who they were getting and what he stood for. After all, McClellan might just try to restore the Union, and that was a point of discussion. Southerners did not want any part of the old nation. Then during November the 1st through the 4th, the Confederate General Forrest continued harassing Sherman's supply line to Georgia along the Tennessee River. Placing batteries on the West Bank, he shelled the federal gunboats, transports, barges, bulging warehouses, open storage, 2 wagon trains, and the Union soldiers. And the Union soldiers' supply base in Johnsville. Confederates estimated the damage at $6,700,000. That was a lot more money then than it is today. But Union officers were censured for negligence to allow that to happen. And Forrest, he just pulled away unscathed. November the 7th, at a meeting in Richmond, President Davis seemed surprisingly optimistic, despite all the losses that they've had. He played down the capture of Atlanta he saw no vital points of trouble in the financial outlook and was far from discouraging. He recommended that the government purchase slaves for work in the army, and then, afterwards, free them at discharge. He did not advocate the use of Negroes as soldiers, but left the door open in case the situations changed. He favored a negotiated peace, but only with independence, not, quote, unconditional submission to degradation. In the United States, this day was the election eve. On November the 8th, which was a Tuesday, Lincoln was elected president, with Andrew Johnson of Tennessee as vice president. McClellan lost, of course, and he resigned from the army. Regarding his election, his only comment was, quote, "For my country's sake, I deplore the results." The Republicans increased their strong majority in the House to over 2/3 and retained a heavy plurality in the Senate. Lincoln stated that the result of the election, quote, "will be to the lasting advantage, if not the very salvation of the country." On Thursday, November the 10th, Sherman, in Georgia, continued to destroy the railroad and other bases in Atlanta and set out on his own. He stated that, quote, "the Army will forage the country liberally during the march," end quote. If they met resistance from inhabitants, Army commanders should, quote, "should enforce a devastation more or less relentless." And furthermore, horses, mules, wagons might be appropriated freely as they plunged deeper into Georgia towards the sea. In response to another victory celebration, Lincoln pointed out that the election in the midst of a civil war showed, quote, "how sound and how strong we are." Now he called for unity in a common effort to save our common country. Sherman's army now stood detached and cut off from all communication with the rear. 4 corps, totaling 60,000 infantry, plus about 5,000 artillery, were ready for the great military adventures. Sherman wanted to concentrate on destroying the city of Atlanta, except for houses and churches. He wanted to make sure that the military, manufacturing, and communication facilities could not be immediately reactivated by the Confederacy. That's the reason for the devastation and this destruction. President Lincoln accepted the resignation of Major General George B. McClellan and named Sheridan to the rank of Major General in the regular army. And finally, on November 15th and 16th, General Sherman left Atlanta, starting a new campaign. Behind him was a smoking city and its economy in ruins. What people who remained there were desolate and bitter. Since all communication with the rear was cut, the North would hear little from him for weeks to come. And that, my friends, is the news up to today in 1864. Thank you.